They turned up in their thousands, rejecting plans to end the decades-long exemption from military service. Many secular Israelis view ultra-Orthodox Jews as a burden on the economy, who benefit from state assistance while contributing nothing themselves. Just what's behind this change in Israel, and what does that mean to the so-called secular religious status quo? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. Military service is compulsory for all Israeli citizens, except ultra-Orthodox Jews. But it's an arrangement that has caused widespread resentment in Israel. Proposed legislation likely to be passed in the coming weeks would end exemptions for Jewish students pursuing religious studies. Israel's ultra-Orthodox Jewish community has come out in the hundreds of thousands to protest against the bill. Alan Fisher reports from Jerusalem.
They wanted a show of strength, they got it. Hundreds of thousands filling the streets of West Jerusalem, stretching back as far as the eye could see. Ultra-Orthodox Jews angry at government plans to have them serve in the military. The massive turnout, a sign of the anger in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community against the government's plans. From the stage, no political rhetoric, no fiery words, just a call to prayer and to protest. They began arriving hours before the official start. Many walked for kilometres. They came from all over Israel. Since the foundation of the state, the ultra-Orthodox have been exempt from serving time in the military. Their prayers, their religious studies seen as their service to the country. But from a few hundred given a pass, it's grown to hundreds of thousands. The government wants that to change. The ultra-Orthodox believes that could put the very spirit of Israel at risk.
We've proven that our contribution helps the community and kept the people of Israel as one nation throughout 3,000 years. And we're confident that what we do is the actual deed that combines and keeps the Jewish nation to flourish in the future.
The government is hoping it can find a compromise, but insists the ultra-Orthodox must do what every other Israeli does and serve in the military. But there's no sign of the religious right backing down, and it says it will continue to take its strength to the streets. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Well, the ultra-Orthodox insist their young men serve the nation through prayer and study, and that's why they should be exempt from certain aspects of life. And it's not just military service they are exempt from. Ultra-Orthodox Jews make up 10% of Israel's 8 million people. Most of the men among them are unemployed and rely on state handouts and donations. As a result, they are a relatively poor social group. But their special standing in Israel has long caused resentment among secular people who demand the ultra-Orthodox community must share the social burden. In fact, more than two-thirds of secular Israelis now support separating religion from government control. Oh, for more on this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Jerusalem, Jonathan Reinhold, director of the Argov Center for the Study of Israel and the Jewish People. From Oxford, Sarah Yael Hirschhorn, lecturer on Israeli studies at Oxford University. And also from Jerusalem, Gidon Katz, spokesman for the Ultra-Orthodox Rally. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Jonathan Reinhold. How dangerous is this very clear division in Israeli society?
I think dangerous is the wrong word to use. I think it's a serious rift, but we've always known it's a serious rift. In many ways, in fact, this whole demonstration is the coming to a head of a rift which has been there from the very start. And despite what it seems, I think that actually it's a sign underneath it all that the ultra-Orthodox have been coming to terms with the fact that they need to do more in Israeli society as they become a larger part of that society. And had it not been for a tactical mistake in the law which talks about calling them up for service in the army, which says that they would be arrested and thrown into jail if they don't serve. If that hadn't been one of the conditions, I think this would have passed with less anger and less rancor.
Well, let's go to Gideon Katz on that particular answer. We heard the reference to what was called a tactical mistake, that perhaps these type of demonstrations wouldn't have taken place if there had not been the provision for imprisonment in this legislation. Your view?
Well, I think we went to demonstrate because we believe that the government has come against the option to free choice for learning Torah in Israel. And we believe that the acts of the government do not leave us any choice but to pray for this to be cancelled. It's true that if there was been less talk about criminalization, then it would have been easier to digest. But still, what we see of the acts of the government these days is that they are absolutely anti the fact that we could learn in peace in Israel.
Well, Sarah Yael Hershon, you heard there the statement a bit earlier that this is a long process in being. This is an issue that goes back to the very formation of the State of Israel. Why is it now coming to a head, do you believe?
Well, picking up on my comments of my colleague Jonathan, this indeed is the culmination of an historical process that had began over 6 decades ago, before the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. One should recall that the ultra-Orthodox were some of the most vigorous opponents to Zionism before the founding of the State of Israel, and while have had a de facto accommodation and living in the State of Israel, have never completely accepted its ideological premise. In the early years of the State of Israel, Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, one of the first secular leaders of the state, talked about the religious factions as a group that he could hold in the palm of his hand so that he could crush them in a fist if necessary. And these early draft exemptions were only intended for several hundred students who were learning in religious seminaries at the time. Now, over the past 6 decades, the ultra-Orthodox and as well as the national religious have grown in strength, resources, organization and power within the Israeli polity, and I think we're seeing the culmination of their rise to power in these draft protests yesterday.
Well, Jonathan Reinhold, we have seen the rise in power perhaps, but what we've also seen at the moment is the fact that for the first time in a decade, the ultra-Orthodox parties have very little power in government, no representatives in the cabinet, for example. This is not a coincidence that this legislation is coming now at a point where there seems to be no political risk.
Indeed, in fact, we could say that this government was formed around a consensus which is formed in mainstream Israeli society among the religious who are not ultra-Orthodox, and among the secular and among the traditional who have simply had enough. Mainstream Israeli society, if you take women in the society, work the hardest, the longest hours of any country inside the OECD. And yet if we look at the male ultra-Orthodox population, they have the lowest take-up of employment, the highest non-employment rate, and yet as a group they receive the highest amount of benefit payments. And they don't serve in the IDF. And anger towards this sector of the population, not because of their religious beliefs, not because no one wants to stop them being religious, no one wants to stop them studying, there's freedom of religion in Israel. Religious people as well as secular people simply had enough, and they forced the political system, they voted for political parties, they forced their representatives to form a coalition that would deal with this issue. And that is why it is being dealt with now. If at the beginning of the state the ultra-Orthodox were a very small percentage of the population, today they're about 10% of Israeli Jews, 25% of children in Jewish schools in Israel, and in 25 years there'll be over 25% of the population as a whole. And it's just a sense that the Israeli mainstream public feels that both economically and socially things cannot go on this way and things need to be dealt with, and that is why it's come to a head now.
Well, Gideon Katz, your view on that particular point, particularly that issue of a political alliance having formed within what's normally a fractious Israeli government, which does at this point all agree.
Well, unfortunately, the fact is, yeah, the government was formed anti the ultra-Orthodox, and what they've achieved is not only allowing the blessed movement inside the ultra-Orthodox community, as it's grown to start shifting into the working system, they've created a situation that everyone together is now anti all what's been achieved in the last 10 years. I don't know if Jonathan is aware, but I assume he is, and people are ignoring that there's more than 10,000 Haredi students in university and colleges. There have been a 37% of increase of the working force in the Haredi community in the last 5 years. There's been a tremendous amount of soldiers from the mainstream of the Haredi community inside the army. And what they've done almost overnight, well, within the last 18 months, is to create a tremendous antagonism anti those movements inside the community. And all the achievements that we've tried to achieve, slowly but surely, are now being demolished by the anti-system that we're seeing here today.
Well, Sarah Yal-Hershon, are we moving into a period of coercion where perhaps it is not necessary, as Gideon Katz has been saying? There was a process underway, he argues.
Well, I do think that these protests have marked a sea change in the relationship between the ultra-Orthodox and the state. We should acknowledge, as Gideon has said, that over 1,000 Haredi soldiers, ultra-Orthodox soldiers, currently serve in a voluntary brigade called Nahal Haredi within the military. So there was a process underway to recruit Haredi. Well, the latest figures I have seen have been about 1,000.
There are many more systems.
And they serve...
No, 1,000 in Nahal Haredi, and there are many more projects in the army.
I think the precise number is almost immaterial, but it's the principle that you are referring to.
The principle that I was trying to illustrate was that there was a process underway to recruit soldiers, and the criminalization proposed in this bill has certainly, triggered a great deal of hostility. The other thing I would say is that this protest has unified several different factions within the ultra-Orthodox community, Ashkenazi and Sephardi, amongst others, in a show of strength against the state, which I think is significant.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, for the first time, you are seeing complete unity among ultra-Orthodox groups. All the three major strands are taking part in this demonstration, in these series of demonstrations. Jonathan Reinhold, is this perhaps what is resulting here is a new politicization of the ultra-Orthodox? Remembering it's just a decade ago when a party like Shas was the kingmaker within the Knesset.
I think that it's, as I started, there's been, and as both the other speakers have said, I believe it was a big mistake to say that in 3 years' time, when this law comes into effect, and remember, this law will not come into effect for 3 years' time, and it will only affect a percentage of the ultra-Orthodox. Many will still receive an exemption from serving in the army. But even then, in the case, in 3 years' time, when there are not enough ultra-Orthodox who are going to serve, then they could end up in prison. That was a big mistake, because so long as there wasn't the threat of criminalization, then there is a divide. And as we heard, some ultra-Orthodox are going into the armed forces, some are going into the workplace. Whether it's enough, whether it's quick enough, whether it's enough people, on that there's a debate. But there was good things going on. And unfortunately, I think the desire politically to make a point by the Yesh Atid party has gone too far. And on the one hand, they've been too harsh with criminalization. And on the other hand, they've been too soft in that none of this will happen for another 3 years. And if a week is a long time in British politics, an hour is a long time in Israeli politics, so 3 years is several lifetimes. So who knows if this will even be enacted. But as you state, for the time being, what it has done has united the ultra-Orthodox community in a way that it has not been united recently. And this is definitely a negative development in terms of trying to ease the ultra-Orthodox into the workforce and into serving in the Israeli Defense Forces.
But also, Sarah Yal-Hershon, what we've seen, according to a statement from the Defense Minister, has actually said it is wrong to use coercion. He believes that it is counterproductive to criminalize this process. You've got a division within the government itself, but at the very highest levels, do you not?
Well, you have some divisions, but you also have some unity. The IDF spokesman said yesterday, evoking Holocaust rhetoric, that all Jews were targeted by the Nazis, so therefore all Jews must serve in the military. So even within the IDF leadership, there is, a sense that, that this is important. There's also unity within the government. It's not only, as Jonathan said, an agenda of Yesh Atid, the centrist party led by Yair Lapid, who is seen as sort of the representative of the bourgeois in Israeli society, but he also has full support from Naftali Bennett, the leader of the Jewish Home Party, who represents the national religious, or often the settler movement, who at the moment, settlers comprise approximately 15 to 20% of the Israeli Defense Force officer corps. So there is great pressure from various sectors within Israeli society on both left, right, and center.
So, Gideon Katz, if I want to bring up this particular issue, though, we know that there are many strands within the ultra-Orthodox movement. The most extreme strand would refuse to recognize the state of Israel and has refused to do so for decades on purely religious grounds, insisting that the state cannot be in being unless the Messiah has come. Is it difficult from your point of view to create a unity and agreement among the ultra-Orthodox where you have a variety of positions? All may be opposed to the broad principles of this law, but there are very many different reasons why for this opposition.
Well, let me make it very clear. There's close to 1 million Haredi Jews living in Israel, as mentioned before. And that means it's around 160,000 households. And those extremists that you mentioned are less than 3,000 families. So we're not talking at all about those. We're talking about the mainstream hundreds of thousands of people that live in Israel, and they are part of the state. They recognize, we vote to the Knesset, we want to be part of the system, but we don't want our beliefs to be compromised in any way. And we feel, and I want to make that clear, that we are serving by studying. We're not dodging anything. We believe that our contribution is equal, if not more, by studying the Talmud in Yeshiva. So we are united. We are united together within the frame of the law in Israel, and we just don't want the law to be against us. We're not part of those who are not part of the system.
Well, Jonathan Reinhold, your particular view of that statement we heard there is that, yes, the ultra-Orthodox do serve Israel, they serve by praying. It's the age-old argument from the status quo that some would fight, some would pray. Both are doing their duty to defend Israel. What's your view of that argument now in the 21st century?
Well, I think it's always been nonsense. I think that as we heard already from Sarah, many religious people serve in the IDF who are not ultra-Orthodox. They pray, they study, and they serve in the army, and they confine it. They also pay their taxes. They work. What makes people annoyed is nothing to do with religion. It's to do with fairness. People who work, people who pay taxes, people who serve in the army, get angry when people who don't do those things receive lots of benefits from the state without contributing. And it's all very nice to say that you're praying and that you're studying, but so are many other people, and they're also serving.
Well, let's give Gideon Katz a word in there. He was trying to say something while you were speaking, I think, to argue, Jonathan. Gideon.
Well, this is really offensive because I work and I pay taxes. And so to try and even hint that the Haredi population doesn't pay taxes, that is it's very insulting. We contribute by
it happens to be true, though. It happens to be true that the ultra-Orthodox community
only 30%, only 30%,
three or four times the non-employment rate
in Israel,
of the rest of Israel.
Excuse me.
It's
only
30%
of the working force in Israel pays income tax.
Well, Gideon Katz, just make your point. 30%, you were saying.
Only 30% of the working force in Israel pays 80% of the taxes, and part of that equal share of the Haredi population. The Haredi population contributes in all other taxes. So that they don't contribute, that's nonsense. By saying that those who serve, they learn too and they pray too, that's great. That's how I want the army to be. I'm saying that as a division, that is, there's less crime and there's less in the Haredi society, so they contribute in other ways. So that is not an issue. They live in a very modest life, and there's lots to be proud and learn from them. They volunteer more than any other segment in the Israeli society, so they contribute in many, many ways to the society. And by saying
this is really what makes mainstream Israeli society very angry.
Well, let's go to Sarah Yal-Hirshon on this for a third point of view, having had the 2 points of view made very forcibly at the moment. Sarah Yal-Hirshon, your view on that particular point. We've heard the argument there about, yes, the ultra-Orthodox do serve through their prayer. Yes, they do it through good works. Your view?
Well, I think we should recognize that there's great diversity within ultra-Orthodox society in Israel, that there are various socioeconomic brackets within the Haredi society. It is not a monolith. Some are paying more taxes, some are paying less taxes. Certainly the ultra-Orthodox community is very active in supporting its own institutions, whether those be religious or charitable institutions in Israel. The question, I think, is whether the ultra-Orthodox also need to contribute more broadly to many of the other institutions of the state that go beyond their own niche, the army being the primary one and the economy being the other. And certainly we've seen some movement forward, that there is a growing recognition within the ultra-Orthodox society, again, not a monolith, that there is some desire to become more integrated within the military and the economy, but these protests are a step backwards.
Well, let's very quickly go to another point that has been made repeatedly. Gideon Katz, the creeping process of secularization is a point that many in the ultra-Orthodox community have made. They point to the fact of shopping on Sabbath, the change in diets given the massive influx of people into Israel, particularly from the former Soviet republics. Is there a sense that this is just the thin part of the beginning of a wedge in which Israeli society changes completely?
Well, the facts are that it's true that it may be a perception, but 80%, just recent research shows that they are still very, the Jewish values are very important to them. They, by choice, the majority of the people fast on Yom Kippur by choice. Most of the people in Israel, a heavy majority of the people in Israel, don't eat chametz on Passover. So by saying that there is a drift, yes, we are more than a few generations of non-observant Jews. But surprisingly enough, although that we are being attacked left, right, and center in the media, still most of the people in Israel are still very supportive of the idea of looking after and observing some of the religious practices.
Very quickly, Jonathan Reinhold, your view on that?
Yes, that's exactly correct, and that only goes to strengthen the point that what's at stake here is not any hostility towards religion, because most Israelis, even if they're not that observant and certainly not ultra-Orthodox, identify with and keep elements of the Jewish religious tradition. What makes them angry is a feeling that the burden is not equal in Israeli society, and that needs to be addressed. Now, has it been addressed wisely? Perhaps not. But does it need to be addressed? Is it a real issue? Absolutely yes.
Well, a very quick final word from Sarah Yal-Hirshon on this issue of secularization. Sarah?
Well, I think this reveals the gulf between what we would think of as Jewishness and Israeliness, that these two are not synonymous, and that while many support Jewish traditions across broad sectors of society, there is a sense that supporting institutions of the state goes far beyond just your Jewish identity, and that you must contribute in other ways to society. And I think this is a story that will continue to develop. It has been a tension since the beginning of the state, if not before, and we'll have to see how it develops in the next few years.
Well, at that point, my thanks to our guests, Jonathan Reinhold, Sarah Yal-Hirshon, and Gideon Katz. And you can add your voice to this discussion online at Facebook or via Twitter. Thanks for watching from me and all the team. Goodbye for now.